Hello. In this course of 6 videos, I will try to explain the basics of the Latin adjective. There are 3 points that I'd like to make at the outset. The first is that there are 6 of these videos. How you choose to watch them is, of course, your business, but my advice is that you should watch them in order. This is because I sometimes say something in an earlier video which applies to a later video, but I may not repeat it. The second point is that as we go through the many different tables of adjectives, you may, if you are a beginner in the language, think that Latin has an unlimited number of endings. The biggest difference between English and Latin, I think, is that whereas in an English sentence the function of a word is generally revealed by its position in the sentence, the function of a word in a Latin sentence is most often revealed by the particular ending given to the word. If you do believe that Latin words have an almost unlimited number of endings, it can be a barrier to the effective or indeed to the enjoyable learning of the language. And so let me assure you that there is a very limited number of endings to Latin words. What is called the case ending system in Latin is very efficient. It does not multiply endings without reason, or at least it doesn't do so on the whole. And you'll find as you look at the table after table that I will show you in these 6 videos, that the case endings are actually repeated over and over again. There is much repetition, or there is much recycling of case endings. There is a limited number of endings which you need to know. The third point, and this is worth emphasizing, is that although they look very different, although they seem to behave in very different ways, English and Latin are related languages. It is perhaps a distant relationship. We are cousins of some kind, as opposed to sisters, or as opposed to mother and daughter, as is the relationship between Latin and French. But once you peel back the topmost layers of the languages, where there are differences shown in the differences of wording, for example, once you peel back those top layers, you will find that the underlying structures of both English and Latin are very similar. What this means at the moment is that almost everything that I will say about the Latin adjective applies to the English adjective. And for that reason, I think it would be useful to begin this series of videos on the Latin adjective with an explanation of how adjectives work in English. Let us then begin with a loose definition of an adjective. As the slide says, an adjective is a word that adds information to a noun. There is a definition. It may not be the best definition. It certainly isn't the only definition, but it is, I think, a useful definition. And let's follow it by giving some examples in English. The spicy food upset me. The word in red is the adjective. You could take out that red word. You could just say, the food upset me. But there's something missing. Although I've said that the food upset me, I'm not saying anything about the particular nature of the food. I'm not actually giving a reason why the food upset me. Once I add the adjective, however, the spicy food upset me, I have provided worthwhile further information about the food. I may indeed have provided a reason why the food upset me, even if only an implied reason. Or let's take this double adjective construction. It was a cold day in late October. Again, you could take out the two red adjectives. You could take out cold and late. That would leave you with, it was a day in October. That works grammatically, but it's a remarkably flat sentence. If you're trying to set the scene for a narrative, it doesn't say much at all. It was a cold day in late October. There you are. The red adjectives do add, in this case, very worthwhile information to the nouns. Or, your car isn't worth a brass farthing. Languages are very conservative, much more conservative than institutions. What this statement says is that your car is worthless. Farthings haven't been minted since the 1950s. Brass farthings, I understand, refers to a time in the reign of Charles II when farthings were issued with a small amount of brass in the centre, a brass plug, I believe. The origin of our expressions is always interesting, but the addition of the red adjective brass to farthing emphasises that your car is a worthless pile of scrap metal. There are two other adjectives, worthless and scrap. Let's move on, however. You'll notice that overwhelmingly in English, the adjective goes in front of its noun. We think of that as reasonable, and indeed we think of it as logical. However, there is no particular reason why the adjective should always go in front of its noun. It doesn't in many other foreign languages, certainly not in Latin, as we'll see later on. But it doesn't always go in front of the noun in English. Let's have a look at these expressions. The heir apparent, the body politic, the devil incarnate, the poet laureate. Here you have a noun followed by its adjective. No trouble in working out those meanings, is there? These are, however, in a minority of cases. They are sometimes poetic constructions, but mostly they are very old constructions. They date from a time when the order of words in English was somewhat more flexible than it has become in the past few centuries. It may show an influence of French, or it may even show an influence of Latin. But as I said, this is the minority of cases. In English, it is nowadays considered an almost invariable rule that an adjective should come before its noun. Let us now look at types of adjective. This is the case in both Latin and in English. What I will say here covers adjectives in both English and in Latin. And because I think we can take it for granted that our English is a great deal more fluent than our Latin, I do advise you to pay close attention to this explanation of the three kinds or the three degrees of comparison for adjectives. This is something that, when thrown at you in the course of learning a foreign language, can be confusing. But remember, English and Latin are related languages. What works in one language often works perfectly well in the other. And when we talk about 3 degrees of comparison for adjectives, all we are doing is analysing a set of constructions that all of us use every day in our own native language, which I will assume for present purposes, though I may be incorrect, is English. So the 3 degrees of comparison. The first is the positive degree. This is the base form of the adjective. It doesn't show any degree of comparison. It simply adds information to its noun. I've given 3 examples of a positive adjective here. Low, big, fat. It was a low trick. It was a big earthquake. He has a big fat wallet. I don't think I need to say more about that. Let us then pass to the second degree of comparison, which is the comparative degree. And here again are three examples: lower, bigger, fatter. You use these when comparing two different objects. Westminster Bridge is lower than Tower Bridge. America is bigger than England. I am fatter than you are. Sadly, that may be true, but rather than reflect on the comparative state of health between us, let us move to the third degree of comparison, which is the superlative degree. And this is the form an adjective takes to compare three or more things. Examples: lowest, biggest, fattest. The lowest bridge across the Thames is Putney. Don't know if that's true, I've just made it up. But some bridges are lower than others, and one of them must be lowest of all the others. Biggest. Jupiter is the biggest planet in the solar system. Fattest. I may not be the fattest person in Deal, but I regret to say that I am the fattest person in my household. I could say more about the 3 degrees of comparison of adjectives, particularly in English. There are 1 or 2 wrinkles in English which you don't see in other European languages like French, Latin, Greek, etc. But this is a set of videos about the Latin adjective. And so let us take these 3 illustrations of positive, comparative and superlative degree as broadly true. They apply to English and they also apply to Latin. However, though I don't want to spend more time than I need on talking about English adjectives, there are 2 further points that I should make about these English adjectives. The first is that English adjectives have no special form. There is nothing about an English adjective that makes it jump out to a foreign learner of our language, screaming, "Look, look, I'm an adjective, pay attention to me." If you look at these adjectives: cold, hot, worthless, inseparable, there is no commonality in their form. That is not the case in Latin, you'll be pleased to hear. The second point is that English adjectives are invariable. They do not show any change. It doesn't matter whether they add information to a subject or an object. It doesn't matter if they add information to, we don't bother with genders, but let's carry on. It doesn't matter if they add information to a masculine or a feminine noun. It doesn't matter if they add information to a singular or a plural. English adjectives are absolutely invariable, they never change. Look at these examples. The wicked student is in the garden. Student, I will say, student I will insist, is a nominative case noun. I'll take it as masculine, and it's singular. And the adjective that qualifies it, or the adjective that adds information to it, is wicked. Keep an eye on that red wicked. Move to the next one. I beat the wicked student. Student here, the noun, that's accusative, or it's an object in English. Again, I'll take it as masculine. Doesn't have to be, but I'm going to take it as such. And it's certainly singular. But again, the adjective that qualifies student, wicked, that's exactly the same as in the example above. Or look at this one. I spoke to the wicked students. Students here is dative, but I'll still take it as masculine, and it's undoubtedly plural, but wicked is still wicked. And then the last one. The student sat with the wicked girl. Girl here I will take as ablative. That's feminine, isn't it? And it's singular. And yet again, the adjective wicked that qualifies it, or that adds information to it, is still wicked. It never changes. That's nice for us, native speakers of English. It's actually rather nice for those foreigners who are learning English. You just need to learn one form of the adjective and that's it. Pass on to something else. The only downside, I suppose, is that you need to be careful with the placement of adjectives. That they really can't be too far separated from the noun. Usually they come together. But these are two features of English adjectives, that there is no set form for them and they are invariable. You do not see this in Latin. There is one last point I'd like to make about adjectives where I will use English rather than Latin as the main source of examples. There are, in both English and Latin, two particular kinds of use for adjectives. There is the attributive use and there is the predicative use. Do pay attention here. This is a distinction that we make every day in English. It is exactly the same kind of distinction as is made in Latin. But again, if the first time you hear about attributive and predicative uses of adjectives is in the course of learning Latin, then it can give you a great deal more trouble than if you are simply to refer to your own everyday use of English. Let us then explain what these words mean. When an adjective is attributive, it means that the adjective and the noun come already joined into the sentence. It's rather like watching two people walk holding hands into a room. They enter as a unit. So here's an example. I beat the wicked student. Before the sentence begins, we have established, it seems, that the student is wicked. Oh, and here is the sentence in Latin for what it may be worth. Discipulum scelestum verberavi. I think I'm giving this in Latin to point out that attributive adjectives are not always obviously together in Latin. Look at this. Scelestum verberavi discipulum. You can do that in Latin. In this example, I suppose I'm trying to emphasize that the student is wicked. So, attributive adjectives are already fused with their nouns before the sentence starts. They come together into the sentence already joined. Predicative adjectives supply new information about a noun, and they supply this new information as the sentence proceeds. Or, the noun and the adjective do not come into the sentence already joined. They come together only once the sentence has begun. Two people come separately into a room. They notice each other, they walk towards each other, they then form a unit. Example, the student is wicked. I start out by referring to a student. I then add a piece of information about him, that he is wicked. Discipulus est scelestus in Latin. And here is a contrast that perhaps I shouldn't make. I'm in two minds about it, but I've done it, so I'll make it. It was a very cold winter. There you have the attributive use of the adjective. The cold winter, or perhaps the very cold winter, come into the sentence already joined. In Latin, erat hiems frigidissima. We then have the predicative use of the adjective. The winter was very cold. Winter comes into the sentence unburdened with any adjective. It is simply winter. I then, in the course of the sentence, add the predicate very cold. So winter begins the sentence uncoupled with an adjective. it ends the sentence coupled with an adjective. In Latin, hiems erat frigidissima. Perhaps I shouldn't have insisted on this contrast. You will find as you continue learning Latin that it is a little harder in Latin than it is in English to decide whether an adjective is used attributively or predicatively. Sometimes this will be a matter of your personal judgment, but although you do need to exercise your judgment, and although your judgment may sometimes be defective, it is, I think, still useful to know that there are these two different uses for an adjective. All this being said, and there's an ablative absolute for you, all this being said, let's now proceed to the Latin adjectives. In contrast to the 2 points I made earlier about the form of adjectives in English, the first is that Latin adjectives are much easier to recognize. They have the same form as first, second and third declension nouns. I will say more about that in the next video, but you will not find the same degree of chaos. Is that a just word? I think it is. You won't find the same degree of chaos in Latin with the forms of adjectives as you'll find in English. The second point is that although in English, remember, adjectives are absolutely invariable. It doesn't matter what you're doing with the noun, it doesn't matter how many there are, the adjectives never change. Wicked, 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 and that's the end of it. In Latin, adjectives have to agree with their nouns. They need to match up, and they need to match up in 3 ways. An adjective must agree with its noun in case, in gender, and in number. If you've studied French or Spanish or Italian, you'll know about the agreement of noun and adjective in terms of gender and number. Where Latin is concerned, you add the 3rd dimension of case. As ever, let's give some examples, and I'll give some examples in English and then their equivalents in Latin. The wicked student is in the garden. Student here is nominative, it's the subject of the sentence. I will, though I may be much censured for doing so, take student as masculine, and it is of course singular. So the wicked student is in the garden. Wicked is wicked in English, it doesn't change. But look at this in Latin. Discipulus scelestus in horto est. Here you can see that discipulus is nominative, it is masculine, it is singular, and so is the red adjective, scelestus. They agree with each other, the adjective and the noun. Let's move out of the nominative. Let's take this one. I beat the wicked student. That's accusative, masculine and singular. Student here is the object of the sentence. I am the person doing something. The student is something having done to him. But again, wicked doesn't change in English. But have a look at this in Latin. Discipulum scelestum verberavi. Discipulum has shifted into the accusative case, and so has the adjective that accompanies it. Let's take the 2 more remote cases. I spoke to the wicked student. That's a dative, that is, for what it's worth in English. Dative masculine and of course plural. In Latin, discipulis scelestis dixi. Notice that discipulis is now in the dative case, in the dative plural, and so is the red adjective. That has become scelestis. So as the noun changes case, as it changes number, and perhaps as it changes gender, so the adjective changes to match those changes in the noun. You can see that very clearly here with the last example. The student sat with the wicked girl. Girl is ablative, for what it's worth in English, feminine and singular. Have a look at it in Latin. Cum puella scelesta discipulus sedit. Puella, ablative, feminine, singular. The red adjective scelesta, that is also ablative, feminine and singular. Cum puella scelesta discipulus sedit. And that's all I have to say in this first of 6 videos about the Latin adjectives. I hope that I've made myself clear. If I haven't, do go back in the video and have another look at it. If the video itself is at fault and you're one of my students, do have another look at the video. Write down your question, write down your objection, and come and see me in the lesson. Remember, if you find a fundamental error in this video, I shan't be happy, but at the same time I shall be very grateful, because it means there is a problem with the video and I shall need to remake it. And although I don't want to remake it, I'm sure that if I do remake it in the light of a fundamental error, the next video will be an improvement. Whatever the case, this is the end of the first video, and I will now proceed to the positive degree of comparison in the next video. Thank you for watching this.